All right, let's talk about one of the biggest and maybe most misunderstood financial players on the world stage, the World Bank. Think about this for a second. Rebuilding an entire continent after a world war, kicking off India's Green Revolution, even funding the big push for clean energy today. What do all these massive, world-changing events have in common? Well, it turns out there is a common thread, and it's a single organization that's been shaping economies for, believe it or not, almost 80 years. And that organization is, you guessed it, the World Bank. Now, on paper, its job seems pretty straightforward, right? It's basically a global bank that gives loans and grants to low and middle-income countries for big projects. But as we're about to see, its real story and its actual impact, oh, it's way more complicated than that. Okay, so to really get a handle on the World Bank, we've got to go back, way back, because where it started is pretty different from what it does now. So picture this. It's 1944. The world is in chaos. A huge meeting, the Bretton Woods Conference, gets together to figure out how to build a stable economy after the war. And out of this, the World Bank is born. Its first job was massive: rebuild a Europe that was just shattered. But, as Europe got back on its feet, the bank's mission took a huge turn. It pivoted, and its new focus became this enormous goal: tackling poverty all across the developing world. So here's the thing. When we say the World Bank, that's actually a bit of a shortcut. It's not just one single bank. It's a whole family of organizations working together. The best way to think about it is like a toolbox for global development. Seriously. Inside this toolbox, you've got 5 different tools, and each one is designed for a very specific job, all aimed at boosting economic growth and keeping things stable. All right, let's open up that toolbox and see what's inside. You've got your 2 main lenders, the IBRD, which is the original bank lending to middle-income countries, and the IDA, which is super important because it gives interest-free loans to the absolute poorest nations. Then you've got the investment crew. The IFC helps grow private businesses, MIGA acts like an insurance policy for investors against political problems, and the ICSID is basically the referee, settling investment disagreements. All 5 of these together, that's the whole shebang, that's the World Bank Group. Okay, so that's the theory, but how does this all work in the real world? Let's zoom in on a fantastic example: the bank's relationship with one of its most important partners, India. I mean, just to give you some scale, the bank has 189 member countries. It's huge. But India's story with the bank is, well, it's pretty special. It really shows us a lot about how the world itself is changing. And here's where it gets really interesting. You see, India wears 2 hats. On one hand, it's a founding member and has been one of the biggest borrowers from the bank. But on the other hand, it's also a major contributor, putting money in to help other low-income countries. This dual role is incredible, and it perfectly captures India's economic journey and its rising power. And the bank's fingerprints are all over India's development story. I mean, we're talking about huge, game-changing projects. It helped fund the Green Revolution, which transformed agriculture. It financed massive national highways. It even played a huge role as an advisor when India opened up its economy back in the 90s. More recently, it stepped up with support during the COVID-19 pandemic. And today, the partnership is all about the future, things like renewable energy and making sure everyone's included in the digital world. But don't get the wrong idea. This is absolutely not a one-way street. India isn't just sitting back and taking money. No way. It's a major player. It has its own seat at the main table, the board of directors. Its successful projects often become blueprints for other nations to follow. And importantly, it uses its position to speak up for the entire global south, all while, remember, putting money back into the system to help others. So, for all the good it's done, the World Bank is also a lightning rod for criticism. And this has sparked some really intense global debates about its power, its methods, and what its real impact on the world actually is. Okay, so the first big point of contention is something called conditional lending. Basically, the money comes with strings attached. The bank says, we'll give you this loan, but you have to make these specific policy changes. Now, supporters will tell you this is a good thing. It pushes countries towards smart, stable economic policies. But the critics, they say this is a huge overreach that tramples on a country's right to govern itself. Then there's the massive issue of debt. On one hand, the bank makes these incredible nation-building projects possible, but the flip side can be pretty grim. These enormous loans can pile up, creating what many call a debt trap, a never-ending cycle of borrowing that some developing countries just can't seem to escape. And finally, let's talk about power. Who calls the shots? Proponents see the bank as this amazing help for global partnership, but critics point right to the voting shares. The USA and other Western nations hold the majority of the power, which means their interests often get prioritized. This reads a real imbalance, and many feel it's just not fair. So, you add it all up, and after almost 80 years, the World Bank is really at a turning point. It's trying to figure out its place in a world that's changing faster than ever, all while juggling these really tough criticisms. All right, let's boil this all down. What do you really need to remember? 1. The World Bank started as a rebuilder for Europe and became a global anti-poverty institution. 2. It's not one bank, it's a toolbox of 5 different organizations. 3. India's story is a perfect example of this new dynamic, being both a huge borrower and a major contributor. And 4. The bank is constantly dealing with major critiques about debt, national sovereignty, and who really holds the power. And this quote really hits the nail on the head. The relationship is changing. As countries like India become economic powerhouses, they're not just taking aid anymore. They're true partners, helping to steer the ship from the inside. Which brings us to our final, and maybe most important, question. When you look at the huge challenges we're facing today, climate change, pandemics, the gap between the digital haves and have-nots, the World Bank's mission feels more critical than ever. But the real question is, to tackle these modern problems, how does the bank itself need to change? What does the World Bank of the future really look like?